Yeah, I'm really excited with this type of model. I still think there's like a lot of iterations that are going to happen along the way, and kind of taking feedback from the community. But I like that you still have the existing, token, one vote kind of model that people understand. But then the other side is trying to make sure you're bringing valuable members of the community in and having a voice, and working on retroactive public goods funding. And then I love that there's also this like tie between the two houses, in that you have the token holders actually voting on a few members that will receive those non-transferable NFTs as part of the Citizen House. And so you kind of have like some of them working together. And so we actually just had an election that happened for those 10 badges for the Citizen House from the Token House. But I still think like there are challenges with this, because we talk about like, Optimism Foundation is going to be like handing some of these out. Some of these will be voted in through elections. And so you kind of still have this like issue where people who are well networked and people that are really well known end up getting these kind of badges. So it's like, the election is kind of already just like, okay, what are the names we're most familiar with? And Optimism Foundation is like, who do we already have existing relationships with? So I still think like early days, there's a lot to be improved there. But over time, like Optimism Foundation, they've talked about how they really envision seeing there being like thousands of these badges given out. So I'm excited to see like how that progresses.
Nice. Derek, I think like Reverie is one of the delegates in the Optimism Foundation as well. So what are your thoughts generally on this two token, this two house model?
Yeah, not quite as active as Linda, but I think it's a very interesting experiment. Like it's a pretty simple idea, separating and directly addresses some of the concerns and pitfalls I brought up earlier around the one token, one vote model of tiered token holder governance systems. And yeah, you could draw a direct analogy to how the US political system works, right? With different bodies of government responsible for different things, and creating a bit of a checks and balance. So I think in practice, let's see how Optimism governance plays out. It's still very early, but I think it represents a pretty neat way of implementing a basic checks and balances system that makes sure that one entity or one small set of people does not dominate the conversation.
No, nice. Yeah, I think like on the token house, there's evidently a strong emphasis on delegates, and yeah, you've mentioned both you are pretty active in that space, Linda more so you, and in your personal capacity. I guess for you, with the kind of changes in the token house, how has your delegate experience changed thus far, and potentially how does these houses sort of incentivize maybe members of the community to want to become delegates and contribute, I don't know, in a greater capacity per se?
Yeah, the whole like Optimism governance process has definitely been like a journey, because there's been a lot of iterations from when it started. One thing that I really love is the Optimism Foundation is really involved in the process, and like participates and receives feedback and tries to improve things, and like kind of get consensus from the community. So that I see is like a little bit different than some of the other DAOs, because you actually have this like active participant. And so they'll have, after like voting periods, they'll have reflection periods where it's like, okay, what went wrong in this past voting period? What can we improve? And then the next season you go into it with those changes, always bearing in mind that this is an experiment and let's just see how it goes. And so we've improved a lot since we first launched. And I think one thing I really appreciate about the community is that there's actually compensation in the system. So delegates were retroactively paid for the work that they did as delegates. And when you sign up to be a committee member, which is kind of just a more specialized group that does like more frequent grant reviews, you actually get paid for this work. And so there is an incentive for delegates to be very active and participate, and like actually, in my opinion, levels a playing field for people to participate who might otherwise not be able to. So I'm a big fan of that kind of setup. And then we also just have like the entire community call, or just they're hosted by volunteers. So people just kind of rotate around. They're like, I'll host this week. And it's just a very like active community that I've appreciated. And it's also like very diverse too, because you have like DeFi, NFTs, tooling, like more the technical side. And so it's just like people from all over. And I think it's probably the most diverse group that I've worked with, I would say. But then I would say like some of the issues have been definitely when we started, every delegate had to vote on everything. And so it was just so exhausting because you had all of these like different areas that you had to cover. It was just really overwhelming and frankly got very political too, because it's like, you know, this really public facing project is not getting a grant. And all of a sudden you're some of the delegates that voted no and influenced that decision. So it really started becoming political. So, the Optimism Foundation added some more like kind of community guidelines and code of conduct in during the process. So I'd say that was probably my biggest struggle in the beginning, was kind of some of the tension that got created.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, Cliff, you're as well kind of really passionate about that ecosystem. I mean, has there been anything specific that you've seen that you've liked in terms of the model, in terms of the process, in terms of like lessons learned from your side of things?
Yeah, I think like to Derek's and Linda's point, it's a very interesting experiment to kind of like continue to watch out on. And something that I'm super impressed by is their delegate experience, right? So I believe like the entire Optimism Collective has really zoned in on delegation and putting voting and proposal powers into the hands of people who actually know their stuff, being delegates. So if you go to like the Optimism's governance or rather delegation page as a brand new token holder, you actually get to sort what you're interested in, indicate what you're interested in, and it kind of like directs you to the delegates that kind of aligns with you. So I think like from a UX standpoint, it's really great from the everyday token holder to know exactly who aligns with your values, who you can kind of like sync with the most, and potentially like delegate to them. Helps with like delegate diversity as well, instead of always the same few people just getting the delegated powers. So yeah, I think like that's something that is a good thing for every other protocol that wants to zone in on delegation to kind of learn from, really honing in on the entire delegate experience of it.